This narrow strip of water shuts down for whatever reason. The world doesn't just feel it, it breaks. So within days, oil prices explode, supply chains choke, entire economies begin to stall. And right now, that scenario is no longer a theory. It's happening in front of our eyes as we are speaking. You know, hundreds of oil tankers carrying nearly a fifth of the world's oil are sitting still, trapped at both ends of the Strait of Hormuz, not moving and, of course, not risking aid. Iran, responding to attacks by the United States and Israel, has effectively blockaded one of the most critical shipping routes on the face of the earth. As oil prices surge and the global economy begins to tremble, President Donald Trump has vowed to reopen the shipping route one way or the other. I mean, one way or the other. So it means he would like to use whatever resources necessary, whatever means necessary to help reopen this very important, most important shipping route. But here's the reality, it's not going to happen the way he wants it to. Short of a deal with Iran or a dangerous, prolonged military occupation, which is almost impossible to do. To my understanding, there are no military options. Why? Fully restoring traffic through the Strait of Hormuz may be far more difficult than it sounds. To understand why, you got to understand the geography of this Strait of Hormuz. First of all, it's narrow, it's shallow, so that combination forces massive oil tankers into tight, predictable lanes that can be mined and easily targeted. Yes, easily targeted. These ships pass within miles of Iran's mountainous coastline. High terrain provides direct line of sight, perfect for tracking vessels and firing missiles. Below them, shallow waters restrict movement, and above them, elevated terrain exposes them. Of course, this is not neutral geography. This is a battlefield designed by nature and weaponized by strategy of Iran. So around this narrow corridor sit some of the world's most critical oil refineries and export terminals in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. So this is not just a regional choke point, it's a global energy lifeline. Iran's coastline is long, rugged, and deeply irregular. It conceals countless entry points for small attack boats, fast, agile, and difficult to detect. So these boats can emerge suddenly, strike, and disappear into the terrain without any issues within no time. Islands scattered across the strait, the Kesum Island, for example, can serve as missile launch sites and forward operating bases. And Iran has studied this geography in detail, and it has built its defense strategy around the Strait of Hormuz. So weapons are, surprisingly hidden in cliffs, caves, and underground tunnels, small, mobile, and dispersed. So they're difficult to locate and even more difficult to destroy. That is precisely what makes them effective. Because in this state, proximity is everything. When an attack begins, there is almost no time to respond. From detection to decision to interception, just minutes. Sometimes even less than that. So since the war began at the end of February, on February 28th, as many as 17 vessels have already been hit by Iran. And despite thousands of US and Israeli strikes on Iranian military sites, that threat remains because you cannot eliminate what you cannot fully see. So drones can be launched from hundreds of miles away. Anti-ship cruise missiles, many of them mobile, are spread across the coastline. Some launch from hidden platforms, others from underground facilities. They move, they hide, and then they reappear. Iran can also deploy small vessels to swarm ships or lay mines undetected. And those mines may be the most dangerous threat of all because they don't need to detonate to be effective. The possibility alone changes behavior. If there is a credible threat that the water is mined, no navy wants to risk sending its most valuable ships through it. Of course, there's no question about that. So that changes the metrics of everything in this area. President Donald Trump has suggested multiple approaches to reopening the strait, including at one point the idea of jointly controlling it with Iran's leadership. But most realistic options involve military force. And that begins with one objective: strip Iran of its ability to attack ships. But that objective, friends, is extraordinarily difficult. It's almost impossible to do that because Iran's capabilities are not centralized. They are decentralized, distributed, and hidden. Mobile, of course, even after sustained airstrikes, enough capability can survive to keep the threat alive, very much alive. And that's all Iran needs. One of the main strategies being considered by President Donald Trump and his allies is naval escort. Warships would accompany commercial tankers through the strait. Minesweepers would clear paths. Aircraft would fly overhead to intercept drones and strike missile launch sites. It would be a massive coordinated military operation. But the problem is, even this strategy comes with serious risks. So, naval destroyers are not designed for close range, high density combat in narrow waterways. In the Strait of Hormuz, they are exposed from multiple directions. Every system becomes a potential target. Every second counts. And then there are the mines. Clearing them all is slow, dangerous, and of course, time consuming. It could take weeks. Minesweeping crews move slowly and require constant protection. They become targets themselves. Meanwhile, US Marines are moving into the region, and it's possible that they could be used for ground operations, launching raids, deploying air defense systems, or securing positions to support convoy operations. Experts believe these incursions would likely focus on small islands in the state rather than the mainland Iran. But even those islands, like Kashmir, have strong Iranian military presence, and any ground operation carries serious risk. If American forces are killed or captured, the dynamics of the conflict could shift dramatically. Escalation becomes far more likely. And even if all of this is executed successfully, even if convoys move, mines are cleared, and attacks are reduced, there is still a fundamental problem. And that problem is confidence. Right now, nearly 500 tankers sit idle in the Persian Gulf west of the Strait of Hormuz. Most of them are not moving because the risk is too high. Before the conflict, around 80 oil and gas tankers passed through the strait every single day. So military escorts cannot match that scale, and each convoy can only move a limited number of ships. So military capacity by the United States and its allies is finite. Warships are limited, aircraft are limited, resources are limited, and protection does not extend indefinitely because attacks are not confined to the strait. Iran has struck ships in both the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. That means vessels would need protection even after passing through the choke point. This stretches military operations even further and increases the cost, complexity, and of course the risk as well. At the same time, a large scale escort effort drains military resources. It diverts ships, aircraft, and personnel away from other missions in the region. And of course, even beyond the region, there are a lot of missions which the American army have been carrying. So it weakens broader strategic positioning of the US, Israel, and of course its allies as well. And still, it cannot guarantee safety. Of course, there is no concept of guarantee. If Iran does not want you to get out of this Strait of Hormuz, you cannot move your tanker, no matter what. Because in global shipping, perception is everything. So that is what is lacking right now. If shipping companies and insurers do not believe the route is safe, they will not send their vessels. If insurance premiums rise too high, shipping becomes unprofitable. And if ships don't move, oil doesn't flow. Simple as that. This is a basic math which everybody can understand. So even the threat of attack is enough to shut the system down. And the Strait of Hormuz, of course, is mostly not replaceable. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through it every single day. At least it used to pass through before the war started. There are alternative routes, of course, there is no doubt about that. There are pipelines, but none can handle this volume. None can replace this corridor. This is a single point of failure for the global economy. Yes, single point of failure for the global economy to burst. Iran understands that very clearly. It doesn't need to win a conventional war, it only needs to create sustained uncertainty. And there's also a legal and political dimension to it as well. The strait is an international waterway, but it lies between Iran and Oman. So any attempt to control or occupy it raises serious geopolitical questions. So would allies support it? Would neutral nations accept it? Or would it trigger a broader conflict in the region and beyond? Because conflict in this region does not stay contained. That is the number one problem which we've been facing since day one, since Iran was targeted on February the 28th. So Iran has influence across Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and beyond. As you might know, proxy groups and allied forces could target US bases, oil infrastructure, and shipping routes throughout the Middle East and beyond, of course, as well. What begins in the state could spread across the region very easily, almost within no time. So, this is asymmetric warfare. The United States, of course, there should be no doubt about that, has superior firepower. But Iran uses a different strategy. Cheap drones, mobile missiles, fast attack boats, hidden mines, low cost, and high impact, of course. So, in this kind of conflict, overwhelming power does not guarantee control. To truly secure the state, it's not enough to stop most attacks. You have to stop every single one of them because one successful strike by Iran on one tanker is enough to reset everything. So confidence collapses, traffic stops, the system shuts down again. So this is not a contest of strength, it's a requirement for perfection. And perfection is almost impossible to gain, at least in the current circumstances. And time makes it harder. So military operations are expensive. They stretch supply lines, they test political will of various governments, and Iran operates close to home with lower costs and shorter logistics. So the longer this problem continues, the harder it becomes to sustain. Meanwhile, meanwhile, oil prices will continue rising and inflation will continue spreading and increasing. Economies will slow down. Public pressure will build. At some point, the world will not just prefer a diplomatic solution, it will demand one. Because in the end, no matter how large the military operation is, no matter how many ships are deployed, or no matter how many strikes are carried out, all it takes is one successful attack by Iran. So, to bring everything back to a halt. So, as long as a credible Iranian threat remains, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz will not fully return to normal. So the Strait of Hormuz cannot be secured by force alone because the real battlefield is not just military, it's economic, political, psychological, and that is a war that cannot be won with weapons. Thank you.